Warm temperatures are here and the hot Washington summer is coming. Will your residential or commercial cooling system beat the heat this year? For air conditioning maintenance, repair, installation, and service agreements, call the 5-star cooling experts at Crop Metcalf. Their technicians will make sure you and your family are cool all season long. Call 1-800-GO-CROP or visit cropmetcalf.com.
Crop Metcalf is the one with 5 stars.
Crop Metcalf, home of the 5-star technician and proud partner of the Washington Nationals.
Before we jump into today's episode, let's hear from today's sponsor. Honest stories of pregnancy, parenthood, and loss are too often left unshared. We are here to tell the real stories. Join mom, actress, and advocate Tatiana Ali to hear real stories about the joys and humor of parenting to the heartbreak and loneliness of miscarriage and loss in a new podcast from the March of Dimes. Each episode features a parent's honest story about the realities of starting a family. It only takes hearing one story like your own to know you are not alone. To join the conversation, go to unspokenstories.org and marchofdimes.org. Let's get on to today's show. You're listening to the Sisters in Loss podcast, a faith-based grief and loss podcast for Black women, where you will hear stories of miscarriage, infant loss, stillbirth, and infertility to learn there is a testimony in tragedy. You will learn how to heal, gain clarity, find hope and peace, and turn your pain into your purpose after loss. I'm your host, Erica M. McAfee.
Well, thank you, Taysha, for being on the podcast.
Yeah. So I'd like to begin the episode with you sharing a little bit about yourself and what you do.
Okay, my name is Taysha. I am 27 years old. I currently help patients. I'm a patient coordinator at two of the biggest hospitals here in Minnesota. I currently live in Minnesota. I was born and raised in Minnesota. And yeah, I live in Hopkins, Minnesota, which is like probably 15 miles of where I grew up at in Minneapolis, Minnesota. And the hospitals are, I guess, surrounding metro area.
Awesome. So take us back on that journey to motherhood and share with us your loss story and your most recent loss. Because like we were talking before we started recording that this happened a month ago, not even a month ago or something.
Yeah.
So very early. So yeah, share with us your journey to motherhood and your loss story.
So I found out I was pregnant. It literally been a year since I found out I was pregnant. I knew that it was a chance that I was pregnant because, you know, like I was saying, my periods are like clockwork and they usually come on time, you know, every month. So by the time it got to be like Halloween, I knew something was off. So by literally the 1st of November of last year, I took pregnancy tests and the first one read that I was pregnant and I was in denial. So I went to Walgreens and I grabbed about 2 more pregnancy tests and they all said positive. And then around that time I was going to college, I was in college and I went to the clinic there and they did a pregnancy test and I was confirmed pregnant. So I was confirmed about 5 weeks pregnant around that time. So anyway, when it got to be time for my first ultrasound, which was like my first trimester screening, I went, it was probably around 10 weeks of pregnancy. And it was great. It was the most amazing thing ever. I was happy to see him, which of course at that time I didn't know it was a him, but I was so happy to see him. He was so active, so full of personality. Like he was amazing. He'd turn around. Of course I didn't feel him, but he'd turn around on the ultrasound screen. I mean, he was just so active. But it was a great day and it turned into a really sour day because a doctor had came in and told me that same day that he had fluid around his heart. And so we didn't really know what that mean. I didn't really know what that meant. And I asked him, okay, what does that mean? You know, what does it mean? So he couldn't really say. He said, well, you know, just keep an eye on it. So he said, well, follow up 16 weeks. So that's what we did. So at my 16 weeks, I went to another facility. It's called a perinatal. It was over in Minneapolis, Minnesota. And they told me after we found out, because they said that it looked like a girl. It looked like the ultrasound text said it looked like a girl. And she said that 3 times. So me and my mom thought it was a girl for literally a week. But in that day, we were so happy because my mom wanted a girl and because she already has 2 grandsons. And that same day, they took us into another room and told us that, my son had hypoplastic left heart syndrome, which means that the left side of his heart was smaller and it didn't develop, it's not developing the way it should. And they also told me that he had a diaphragmatic hernia, which is hernia to most people sounds like it's just like something they could surgically remove. It's not one of those hernias. It's like a hole. It was a hole in his diaphragm, which was later replaced two days after he was born. It was repaired, actually, excuse me. So they pretty much put it on the table like that. And they told me that I could term the pregnancy. They were pretty much leaning towards me terming the pregnancy. And that was one of the most saddest days of my life. We cried. I sat there and cried. And I'm like, well, how can I give him up? And I've always wanted to be a mom. Always. This was my first pregnancy ever. And I was excited to be a mom. And I was, finna give my little baby boy the world. And then they told me that. And that was one of the saddest days of my life. So then I told him, like, I'll continue with my pregnancy. It's only in God's hand. We'll see how he does. So I continued my pregnancy, continued my, first it was monthly, like a regular, pregnancy. And in the last few months, it got to be pretty much every 2 weeks. And I delivered him at 38 weeks. He was a full-term baby. And he was born, he needed 3 minutes of chest compressions. And I had to be put to sleep because they scheduled me a C-section for the 26th of June. And he came on the 23rd of June. I had contractions and everything. He was ready. He was ready to come out. He came out and the strongest little boy ever. Like not saying that just because of his mom, but just because he was brave. And I had so many pep talks with him while he was in my stomach. Like I told him, talked to him, and that he had to be strong. When he came out on his own, he had to be strong. And, mama couldn't do everything I couldn't, you're here, you have to do everything on your own. He came out and he literally but furthermore, he stayed in the hospital. They repaired his diaphragmatic hernia at 2 days. It was on the 25th of June. They repaired it. He healed. And then he was moved up to the cardiovascular floor and he became just a straight heart patient because he was in the NICU for about 3 weeks. And then he recovered, went up to the cardio floor, and he stayed up there for 2 months, up until he passed. They did procedures on him. He wasn't a candidate. I learned early on that he wasn't a candidate for heart surgery because he had a lot of lung pressure. Like his lung pressure actually intensified throughout the time of him being there. It intensified. And he had a lot of SVTs, which is supraventricular tachycardia, which, the left side, that right side that was more stronger, it was like heartbeat was beyond the roof, like 300, and he had a lot of them throughout that time. And so that made his heart weaker, and he was still a hypoplastic, so it made it more weaker, I think. But in his last days, I was able to hold him. I was able to pretty much call the shot because if he was, I think it would have made it a lot worse if he was there and I wasn't there. He went into cardiac arrest and I wasn't there. I think it would have been a lot worse for me. But because it was like these recurrent episodes of fevers and high heart rates, and he had bronchiolitis in his tube, so he was on a breathing tube the whole 3 months of his life. And so he had a lot of that recurring fevers and high heart rate. So in his last day of life, I stayed at the hospital, it's called the Ronald McDonald House. And then I stayed there and the doctor called me and she's like, she doesn't know what more she could do. She doesn't want to keep pumping him with fluids because he was puffy. He had got really puffy. Like over the last week, he got really puffy. So that last morning she called me at it was probably at 2 a.m. And I came right up because I was downstairs in the house and I, came right up. And he was there and they didn't know why. It was pretty much, like I said, a recurrent thing with his stats being off. They called them pre-ductal stats and post-ductal stats. They were off. So I made the decision. I called my mom and I told her, I'm like, we should probably come down here. And then she called my aunt and my aunt came, then my cousin came, and then my sister showed up. So I made that decision. I got him baptized that morning. The chapel came in, they baptized him. And about it was probably like 6:10, they pulled the plug and they pulled the breathing tube out and his G tube and his feeding tube that he had in his nostril. So I was able to see his full face and he was beautiful. He looked just like me. He was like me. He was everything. And they pulled the tubes out, was able to see his face. And I think he was ready. He was ready. I already knew he was ready. But I know a few days beforehand, I told him, it's okay, baby. I know you're tired. I'm tired for you. And that morning, I think he was already transitioning, with God. And because he didn't really move at all, he was laying there in my arms, and then they pulled it, and he didn't, he wasn't like gasping, nothing. He was like literally just went to sleep. It was peaceful. And it was peaceful for me the most. Well, of course for him, but for me, because I had told my mom a month or so before, I'm like, if anything happened to him, I'm like, God might as well take me. If he takes him, he has to take me, because that was my soulmate. Like, that was my everything. And to be a first time mom and experience that, it was the most pain I could ever, that I'm still feeling, that I could still imagine as a first time mom. But at that moment, and as I told my mom, like a few days after that, I'm like, I don't feel that way. I don't feel suicidal. I don't feel like I could die, which it's still in the healing process. So, it's kind of iffy, but it's one of those things where I'm at peace, and I'm like, I don't feel like I was when I was talking. So he passed at 6:19 a.m. and they declared him, or pronounced him, dead. And I was able to bathe him, and we walked him down to the doors of the morgue, and I was able to, be there for him more than I could ever imagine, or ever, I guess, however the process there. But it was peaceful. It was really peaceful. And of course, I'm still dealing with it a month later. And I released the balloon. I think I'm going to do a tradition where I release a blue balloon every month on the day that he passed. And that's what I did this past Tuesday or Thursday, the 2nd, because he passed October 2nd. So that's my story.
Awesome. Wow. So it's only been, a few weeks.
Today's podcast episode is sponsored by the March of Dimes. There is no perfect pregnancy, birth, or parent, and yet we rarely hear the real stories. It's time we speak up. Mom, actress, and advocate Tatiana Ali hosts Unspoken Stories, a new podcast from March of Dimes featuring real stories from the joys of parenthood to what happens when things don't go according to plan. You can listen to Unspoken Stories for free wherever you get your podcasts, or by visiting unspokenstories.org. We see a lot of perfect images of pregnancy, birth, and parenting, but more and more people are standing up to tell their real stories. In this podcast, you will hear some of those real stories from the joy of parenting and the complexities of dealing with illness with actress and mom Jamie Lynn Sigler, a mom coping with loss and raising 2 toddlers, to the realities of parenting a baby born prematurely. These brave moms and dads have the courage to speak up and share their laughter, tears, and triumphs so that no one has to feel alone in their experiences. Sisters in Loss, I hope that you will join this important conversation, whether you're a parent or you're considering becoming one. Subscribe to Unspoken Stories for free wherever you get your podcasts, and learn more by visiting unspokenstories.org. That's unspokenstories.org.
So really take us on that journey through the NICU, because I'm sure there was some grief. I'm sure there was, you questioned God on, what was going on with your son, and then just the rises and falls of hearing bad news constantly every time that you went to the NICU, and then to see your child and not being able to respond back to you, the way that you want him to. So take us on that NICU journey, those 3 months that he spent there, the highs and the lows, and really how your faith played a role in that.
Well, I can remember I prayed. As a praying woman, I prayed more than life can even imagine a prayer. I prayed like I just wanted my baby home. And during the time, in the hospital, I'd have problems with the nurses. I was pretty much an advocate for him, of course, because he couldn't make noise. Like, he had the breathing tube in his whole 3 months. So he couldn't cry. If you know that he's in distress or crying or something wasn't right by his facial expression. And he had the most amazing facial expressions. Like, he had started this thing within a month after being on the cardio floor, like where he would raise his eyebrows to you. And he, I don't know, like they would say like they had never seen a mother and son bond, especially in that condition. But our bond, we still had a mother and son bond regardless. Like, he knew his mom. And I'm not saying that as, of course, babies know their mom. I'm saying that because he was a ill baby laying in the hospital. He would act like a baby sometimes, but he couldn't because he had restrictions. But he knew his mama. We created this bond that was so strong, and so I was in awe. Like, I admired him so much. But in that time, in like the NICU portion of it, I remember my first complaint, like, on a nurse, and it was like the one and only nurse. But I didn't like how she like handled him. She looked like she was rough with him. I talked to the charge nurse and told her about it, and pretty much things like that. Like, I would speak up if something wasn't right. And I didn't like the way she was handling him. So I told on her. I said, I don't want her in his room. And it was kind of like that. It was more like just advocating for him and praying and coming home when I couldn't bring him home, and just asking God to just, give me my baby. Let me be a mother to my baby the way I've always wanted to be. Because since, me being a child, like, I literally knew I wanted to be a mom. So it's pretty much asking him and just trying to keep my faith in him. And like I said, I had those talks with him. And I told him, like, if you take him, you have to take me. Like, you can't not take me. You can't get, he literally put life into my baby twice. The first when he was born, and then there was a month later when he got up to the heart floor and he went into, his tube got clogged. And so they had to do, compressions on him that morning. And they called me. And I was downstairs in the house. And they called me and I came up and, he was fine. It's like he had this great snapback because he wanted to fight. Like, he wanted to fight so bad. And he was fighting so bad. But it was like, you can't put life into my baby 2 times and then take him away from me. You can't. But I think with time, over that last few weeks of him being on earth, I think it was more of like knowing that he was, in a way, I didn't want to see it, but in a way he was suffering. I think he was suffering more than what I saw. But on that last few days, I saw it way more. And I told him, like, like I said, it's okay, baby. I know you're tired. I'm tired for you. And I tell him all the time, like, if I could do it for you, I would. In a heartbeat, I would. And I told him, like, you would have to come see mama in the hospital. Like, things like, I would talk to him, literally talk to him. And I always think, like, I talk to you like you understand. But he understood. He understood everything I would say. He was like this little angel, literally. But it was more just keeping my faith and just praying about it nonstop. I pray over him. Other people like the chapel would come in almost every day and pray with me. She was really amazing. She'd pray with me, pray over him. My mom would come in. We all pray. But it was pretty much just, just keeping the faith and holding on. And at the end of it, God gave me peace. He gave me the more, and I couldn't ask for anything else other than peace at that moment, because I knew it's like I was serious about the whole, like, I couldn't live without him. And then when it came down to it, I just had this peace of knowing that he's good now. He's better than good. So that gave me a lot of peace. And I have God to thank for that, like 100%.
Absolutely. So what tools or resources or things that you've been doing over the last few weeks to just help you as you go through this grieving process?
I did get some in the mail, a group, like I guess mothers that have lost their kids. And I haven't really touched base with it, but I wanted to. My mom was saying, like, I should. But then it was like probably a few weeks ago, I wrote in a little bit of time of how a big impact he had on my life, and that he continues to have, like, this what happened to him or what, happened to him. And I just wrote about him. I phoned, and then I gave him a little memorial thing in my home that has because I got him cremated. So it has his ashes in it, and has little sayings on it I used to say to him. And then it has this big album book that I put a bunch of pictures in of him. And then it has like his death certificate, his birth certificate, his baptism certificate. And then like these beads that they gave out on the heart floor, like they're like strength beads. And I put them on like this little stand. And it's kind of like this little memorial thing. So every day throughout the day, I'll like rub the little ashes, with his ashes in it, and just talk to him. And I'm always talking about him because I'm always thinking about him. But I think that helps. And in return, of course, with the mail that I get a bunch of sympathy cards from the hospital. And, like I said, with the card that I got with the information about support group. I guess it's just a matter of time before I actually call them and, come in for a support group. But those things have helped me a lot, actually.
Awesome. Yeah, support groups are definitely needed. So I'm happy that your mom is encouraging you to go.
Yeah.
So what encouraging word can you give the mom out there who recently lost their baby for them to keep moving, keep going on their own healing journey?
I would say take every step. Of course, every step at a time, every day, day by day. Just take it step at a time and don't let anybody rush you and think that you're supposed to be okay and you're not. Because a lot of people do say that, like, it's going to be okay, blah, 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 but they don't know unless they're experiencing it. I went back to work and a lot of people knew that I was, I had a baby, I was pregnant, of course, working. And then I come back and I told, at my one job, there was only one person or two people that really knew that he was still in the hospital. But then for him to pass and then going back, and I wrote an email out to everybody and I said, as you guys knew, I took bereavement days. And I said, with that being said, please don't ask me about my son. And that was pretty much just that, because there are nosy people that just want to know what happened and blah, blah, blah. You had a baby, you were pregnant, what happened to your baby? Well, no, I don't need to elaborate. So don't feel like you need to talk about something, of course, because it's none of their business. It's nobody's business but you and whoever you choose to tell it to. It's about keeping your sanity and your business in general, I guess, to yourself. And I guess allowing people to force you to do anything or make you feel, like just certain ways that people can come up, and people say that they understand a lot, and it's like you take it with a grain of salt because you don't want to hear that, and you're like questioning, like really, do you understand? They don't understand. People don't understand until you live it. People don't understand, and it's the most you can imagine how you feel. But I guess everybody is. I would say this.
Awesome. So where can we find you on social, just so we can keep up with you as you're going through your own grief journey?
I do have a Facebook. I'm not really on it. There's nothing about anything on there, like my baby or anything like that. But if you want to add me, you can add me at Taysha, Taysha, Imari. That's my name, Amari. And I should pop up. And then I do have a Snapchat. I'm only on Snapchat, really. That's TUAALI 4513. And I'm usually I'm kind of active, like I'm more active on it now than I was. But you can find me on there, just pretty much living life, I guess. That's about it for my social medias.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Taysha, for sharing your story and sharing your light, and look forward to connecting with you.
Yeah. Thanks so much, Erica. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much for listening to today's episode. I pray that this show was inspirational and a blessing to you. For show notes, visit ericamcafee.com/podcast. Please join us in our offline discussions in our private Facebook group by going to sistersinloss.com. If you're listening in Apple Podcasts, please rate and subscribe to us and leave us a 5-star review. I pray that you all have a blessed week. Keep the faith, and I'll talk to you next Wednesday.
Welcome to another round of Drawing Board or Miro Board. Today we discuss technical diagramming with systems architect Maya. Let's go. First question. You've spent 10 hours slogging over a sequence diagram that should have taken 5. Drawing board or Miro board?
Drawing board. And if I'm being honest, Miro would probably cut that time down by half. With its AI tools and ready-to-go templates.
Next, your diagrams become so bulky, it's more complex than the solar system. But all it takes is a few clicks and...
It's Miro. I've used those technical shape packs way too many times, and stuff is just digestible on its infinite online canvas.
Now, the final question. Everyone's brought in, but you have to make all these tasks all the way over in Jira. But wait, it's done. Is it...
Miro. Easy with its 2-way Jira sync. Easy to plot dependencies. Everyone always knows what's up.
And she's done it.
Join over 60 million people creating technical diagrams without workflow glitches. Get your first 3 boards for free at Miro.com. That's Miro.com.